In 3rd century AD, St. George was traveling in Libya when he came to the town of Cyllene that was being plagued by a dragon. The terrified townsfolk sacrificed sheep, then a man with a sheep, and then they escalated to sacrificing their children. George intervened, confronted the beast, and speared it. But did dragons ever even really exist? Welcome to Truly Terrified, Paranormal versus Physics, where we talk about some really weird stuff, and Joe the scientist explains how it's not possible, or maybe it is. I'm Lynn, and
I'm Joe.
I wanted to find out, when you suggested we talk about dragons, I wanted to find out if anyone has ever claimed to have really seen an actual dragon. And so this is what I got. I did find a few cases.
Ancient cases?
No, recent cases.
Oh, okay.
A lady named Rebecca Deere said, and this was maybe 5 years ago this happened. She said, yes, a few years ago when I was living in Lincolnshire, UK, it was large and black and flew over me as I was driving down the road. It headed over the nearby wood where I lost sight of it. It could have been the size of 3 cars. I would say instantly I knew it wasn't a bird by the way its wings moved and had a very long pointed tail. No, I don't use drugs, and no, I'm not crazy. It's amazing how closed off people's minds are to this sort of thing.
So, here's the thing. If there were dragons, and we didn't have any idea culturally of a dragon, like no one had ever seen one, it had never been thought of, nothing, flying lizard with big wings and long tail, whatever. Then if somebody saw a real dragon, one, they wouldn't have a word for it, right? That's okay. But they obviously would not automatically go to, oh, it's a lizard with big wings and a long tail, right? That's flying. So the very fact that we have in our culture the idea of dragons heavily biases people towards that as an explanation. What if, instead of being lizard forms, dragons were fish forms? So they were actually shaped like fish. They were fish. They weren't lizards. They were fish.
Well, there's the Loch Ness Monster.
Yeah, okay. So if you saw this fish dragon thing flying over, your mind would go to, oh, it's a lizard. You'd say it's a flying lizard, despite that it's actually a fish. So, and that's important because if there's no such thing as dragons, if there's something that looks sort of like a dragon, then your mind will go towards it's a dragon, right? If it was a balloon that was shaped like a dragon.
Okay, so the problem is this. Dragons and conversations about dragons and the belief in dragons have been around for so long. It's a mystical creature. Because they give it different powers depending upon who you're talking to and how old the stories are. It features prominently in folklore from numerous cultures around the world. The interpretations, however, vary widely. In Western lore, particularly since the Middle Ages, dragons are commonly portrayed as winged, horned beings capable of spewing fire. But in the Eastern cultures, that would be dragons are typically depicted as wingless, four-legged serpentine creatures possessing remarkable intelligence. And they say that these creatures often exhibit a unique blend of feline, reptilian, mammalian, and avian characteristics. So kind of a combination of these different animal kinds. Some scholars speculate that the inspiration for these mythical beasts may have been large, extinct or migrating crocodiles, especially when observed in forested or swampy habitats, suggesting they could be the basis for the imagery of modern Asian dragons. Okay, that takes care of Asian because they don't fly. But
no, you'd think, because they're usually depicted with, like, I'm thinking of the parade ornaments as like having almost like feathers and like prominences on their body, right?
And that may
they're
be
brightly
also
colored.
That could also be influenced from other cultures since then, or other stories.
That's true.
But one thing they are is they're more serpentine. They're more like a snake-like thing. They may have legs, but they're more snake-like. Yes, they're colorful. It would be a boring parade if they weren't colorful.
There you have again, like the possibility of culture morphing something.
Yeah.
So maybe it was crocodiles at one time. And then as it was told more and more, the story, it could have been one crocodile in one incident.
Yes.
And as the story was told, it morphed.
Yes.
Like the game of telephone. Let's say there was a dragon, like a holdover from the prehistoric years, and it's came from another dimension that shoots fire and everything, all that. And then someone saw it, you would still have the game of telephone thing. It's not like they're not mutually exclusive.
I agree. So I looked back at where the word dragon came from. It came into the English language during the early 13th century, but the concept of a dragon has been around for ages and ages. So the word originated from the old French word dragon, which of course with a French
accent, dialect,
whatever French emphasis, but it's spelled the same way. And that comes from the Latin word Draco, which means a huge serpent. So the term included any formidable serpent, not necessarily of mythical origin. So that they called any giant serpent creature.
Of which there are.
Yes, there definitely are. There was a concept of this creature possessing a, quote, deadly glance, end quote, exceptionally bright or sharp eyes. And they think that that's probably because people didn't think that snakes blinked because their eyes just appear to be open. But they actually have a transparent scale.
Is it a nictitating membrane?
Yeah, I don't know what
it's something like that.
I don't remember what it's called. So it's this transparent scale that comes down and actually protects its eyeballs and lubricates them. So they do blink. It's just not blinking like we do with an outer eyelid that's really obvious. So that's why they had this deadly glance, the bright or sharp
So
stare.
There's an example of what I've taught. I've said this before. I'll say it again. Something starts out as concrete and then it becomes abstracted and then it turns back to concrete. You have this kind of fluctuation. So it starts as they don't blink. It turns into I'll say poetic description. They have this powerful stare, let's say.
Yeah.
And then it becomes concrete. Their powerful stare can actually kill you or paralyze you or something. And you see that all over the place.
Yeah. The concept of dragons are present in nearly every culture worldwide, as I said earlier, but the earliest documented accounts depict them as snakes. They were initially described in the mythologies of the ancient Near East and were prominently featured in the art and literature of ancient Mesopotamia. Of course, they weren't called dragons then because that's a later name. Tales of storm deities vanquishing enormous serpents are pervasive throughout the mythologies of both the Near East and the Indo-European civilizations. So I think you're right that probably people were frightened or shocked by some creature, probably some sort of large snake or other reptile.
There are also large serpentine.
Yes, although there are no creatures on Earth that can fly and breathe fire. I just want to be certain as far as we know it, and as far as I believe, there are no creatures that can fly and breathe fire. But there are huge lizards that are called dragons, and the most famous is the Komodo dragon.
Komodo dragon, yeah.
Yeah, and it can get up to 10 feet long
they're huge.
And weigh over 300 pounds.
So if you saw that and you didn't know better.
Exactly, and it would scare you. And so as fear does, it magnifies things.
But then you go back to your village and you describe it. And as you tell the tale more and more, and as others tell the tale, they're embellishing it. Some people are using more abstract language, and then you get the thing with it coming back down to... Right. So it goes from, this lizard as long as your wingspan to 20-foot fire-breathing, paralyzing monster.
Yeah. So interpretations of dragons are just very, very different depending upon what region it comes from. Here, well, I shouldn't even say here because I don't think there's anyone in America a culture in America that's built around the belief of dragons. There are certainly people, as I illustrated, that believe in it. Okay, interestingly, the Chinese dragon is very different from the European dragon. In European cultures, the dragon is an aggressive, fire-breathing creature, while the Chinese dragon is a spiritual and cultural symbol that represents prosperity and good luck. And he's also a rain deity that fosters harmony.
So how concrete is that? Like, so for instance, is that just like at any point in Chinese history, you would ask somebody and they would say...
I don't know, but when you look at those ancient buildings, ancient Chinese buildings specifically, but probably any place that's in Asia, you know, with that culture, they have what appear to be dragons guarding the entrance to temples. So they wouldn't have horrible, mean things that are going to kill people.
Well, so there's obviously fake things in the world, right?
Yes.
Some things just are not real.
Right.
Like, there are things, even in our culture, that are not real. But we still talk about them. We still even act as if they're real sometimes.
Santa Claus.
Exactly. In some things, we go really far acting like they're real, like with movies.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So is it just something that, like, if you could like take a Chinese peasant from 400 years ago and put them in a futuristic brain scanning machine and scan their brain, then you would see, no, there's nothing that says, oh yeah, I actually believe.
Okay, there's another thing though, and I think it's important to remember that the people in power probably had a different motivation and intellectual level than the people who were the peons. And so it could be that when someone in power tells the peons there are dragons, the peons believe it. And
that's true. So there's a possibility that some people truly believed it and some people did not actually believe it.
Knew it was BS or a way or a political means to control people. And I put religion in the same category as politics because it actually is just a political means.
And I'd like to really emphasize this, that even if dragons exist, still some things don't exist. Like even if there are fairies and leprechauns and Bigfoot and Loch Ness monsters and dragons and all of that, maybe the chupacabra doesn't exist, you know?
Yeah.
So even if you believe in like telepathy and telekinesis and clairvoyance and etc., maybe demons don't exist.
I do want to say, and I get what you're saying, and I agree with you, but I like to think that, I'm starting off with this, but I will correct myself as I go on. I like to think that when somebody says, I've seen a dragon, that they saw something that through their own fear or miscommunication or the circumstances, they saw something else and believed it to be a dragon.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily think it's always honest mistakes. I do think that frequently things are embellished and conveyed as a means to control people or to make a really damn good story or whatever those things
are. It would
are.
make a good story.
Right.
See?
So it would be nice to say, well, the chupacabra, you know, it's just a mangy coyote, and that's what it was. Because I think that recent sightings of chupacabra have been mangy coyotes or mangy dogs. And maybe they saw a crocodile and they thought, oh my God, it's a giant serpent or whatever. But also maybe it was just somebody spinning a yarn, telling a story, you know, telling, just like the people told the stories about the Kraken at Christmas time to the little children to get them to behave. Maybe they told this story. There's fire-breathing dragons out in the forest.
And we know people do that.
Yes. And actually people are doing the modern equivalent of that now. The problem with doing that is that you run the risk of losing all semblance of trustworthiness. I mean, how is someone going to believe anything you say if they figure out you lied about that? You know, I've heard stories of kids, hopefully there's no kids listening to this, I've heard stories of kids that figure out about Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy, and they feel deceived. I think most kids do not feel that way. Most kids it comes on them slowly and then they go, oh, I get it. This is like a fun game we played.
Yeah.
But some kids feel devastated and deceived. So if you are trying to control children by telling a story about the Kraken or it wasn't the Kraken, I can't remember what it was called.
Which one?
The horrible witch thing that would go around and eat children.
I can't remember the names, but I think there were actually 2 of them.
I'm sure there were many of them, many variations, but yes, I think there were
Krampus.
2. Krampus, that's it.
No, there were like 2 others.
Well, there was the one that was in Greenland.
He was like a pervert, and he kidnapped children and ate them or something.
Oh,
and then there
God.
was another one. I can't remember.
Anyway, so you can't really be trusted if you use that method for controlling people and for keeping people in line. But people do it now. Okay, let me back up. When I was a teenager, I was on the tail end of the whole hippie thing. So I was actually a little kid when the hippie thing was ending. But I wasn't really too aware of some of the stuff that went on, but a little aware because I had teenage siblings. But what they did to try and get people to not smoke pot is they told them lies about smoking pot. Marijuana, for those who call it something else now. I don't think they call it pot anymore.
I think cannabis is more accepted.
So they, they made a movie called Reefer Madness. And the joke was you get stoned and watch it and laugh your ass off because it was so absolutely obviously a lie.
Yeah.
It just wasn't true.
Those kind of things never help. In fact, I think those kind of things for drug awareness for kids, like the DARE stuff, and they actually have worse results than doing nothing because of that same process.
Because then you're not believable. Yeah. And so if you say, well, the first time you smoke crack, you might be addicted, which, by the way, is true. And if you smoke marijuana, you're going to, your eyes will roll back in your head and you'll die, or whatever stupid crap they say. Well, if you've smoked marijuana and you know that did not happen, that's a lie, you're going to assume that everything that was told to you was a lie. So in this case, if that's what it was, and it started out with a way to control people, like the traveling minstrel guy would come to a town and he would tell stories, fantastical stories of having seen dragons and, crazy stuff, because all those people would gather around him and they'd listen raptly because you're kind of a captive audience living in your little village, distances between other people. So this is a very exciting thing to happen. That's one thing. And I think that it very well could be that that's how a lot of these stories start. But if you're going to children, or you're the leader of a town, you're the mayor of a town, and you tell the townspeople, if we don't do these things or you don't pay your taxes on time, this is going to happen, you run the risk of losing credibility. And so however it started, I think it's probably a combination of the two things. And it's clearly not true. However, if there is some kind of longevity of communal memory, there is something that could have been a dragon. It's a type of pterosaur, which is a winged flying dinosaur, and they think that might have been very close to looking like what people depict dragons as looking like.
So I should say, pterosaurs went extinct very long time
I know.
ago. But if somebody found the bones, so fossils of any dinosaur, that could have just been fuel to the fire for dragon myths.
Okay, so think about bog people. How people were probably killed and put into the bog. Some people have said they fell into the bog. I don't think so, because some of them have ropes around their wrists. But those bodies are perfectly preserved and have been there for hundreds of years. Perhaps somebody excavating something for farmland or something found something that was pretty well preserved, not like skin and feathers, but maybe a fossilized remains that showed some of the structure of it, not just the bones.
So that also could be a reason why you see myths about dragons pop up all over the planet.
Yeah.
Completely disconnected from one another. but they share common themes.
Yeah. So I do have one more story of somebody's firsthand experience. I'm not going to say the guy's name because we're probably going to make fun of him.
Okay.
He told this story. I met a dragon. No one would believe it if I told them, but it was the most amazing thing and was a splendid encounter that I will cherish until I die. It was golden in color and about the size of an elephant and had large wings as well as 4 limbs. I remember thinking it looked kind of odd having 6 limbs, but then I realized that 2 of them were wings. It spent all night with me at the edge of a forest near Seattle on the night of May 6th, 2020. Okay, it was during the lockdown.
Uh-huh.
Washington, they have legal drugs. You can take any drug you want. So he's in isolation. He's gone out in the woods by himself. He's probably stoned out of his gourd. Who knows what came and laid down with him.
And also, he could just be lying.
He could be. I don't know how hallucinogenic the effects of mushrooms are, but, you know.
I know that certain like compounds, they call it hallucinations, but it's a perceptual thing versus people who drink cough syrup, diphenhydramine and the other one, whatever it is. So those are like deliriants, I think deliriants. And what they do is, so you're hallucinating, but they're like making you believe the hallucination is really there. As opposed to like you see a pattern on a wall, you don't necessarily believe that the face you see in the pattern is a face,
right.
You know. I don't know other classes of drugs if they match that, but those are the sorts of things. So like somebody who takes, and even, I think even marijuana can do that. If I remember correctly, I might be totally wrong.
I don't think so. I don't think I can.
Whatever the compound, if he was like sitting there looking at a tree and the tree looks like a dragon to him and whatever it is amplifying that belief, then yeah. And he could, then it's not lying. He really was talking to a dragon in his head. Yeah.
Okay, so I think it's pretty clear that neither one of us believe that there are dragons roaming the earth.
However, I have to say that if there was dragons, so if there was like one dragon that flew around, you know, so that would be a rare event to see this one dragon.
I'll say.
I have no causal mechanism for how that dragon came to be, what it evolved from, why more people don't see it, why there's no videos of it, why there's no pictures of it.
Right.
No credible videos or pictures. Like I cannot say how that dragon is.
Right.
How it gets around, because a big creature needs to be very light in order to fly. And from the descriptions of dragons, they're definitely not.
If you go with the Chinese dragon, though, they're on the ground. They're land creatures.
Very, very marginally more believable, but still, it's one of those cases where even if you like assume it is true, it's really hard to fit it into everything else, you know?
Yes, I agree.
Dragons breathing fire? How would that work? People have rationalized that, oh, it mixes chemicals, like there's some ants and what?
Our contact information is in the show notes. You can email us, text us, or even call and leave a 3-minute voicemail. And as always, if you have a story you want to tell, send it to us. Please share, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and never be so terrified you can't run.
Or hold up your shield for the fire-breathing dragon.